basis of this started with a conversation that Bethany and I had at a Starbucks in Tampa when things were not like they are now. Take this coat off. And we actually got into this conversation, heated in a good way, of what people were missing, what professionals were taking for granted and making assumptions about what was true or wasn't true. And the basis for that, and then after a number of years working together, is really the basis of the conversation today. So coming at this from the perspective of that failure actually is the power, not success per se, but really the failure is the pathway and the change that we're now experiencing in lots and lots and lots of different ways. All that to say, history might be useless. The way that, in the context of developing strategy or developing new ideas, that in fact, the way we did it, whatever that means to any of us, might actually be useless. So quick bio, Bethany, why don't you, if you would, just rewind back history, just in the context for where you were in your career and kind of where you are now, and kind of hint at where we're going.
Sure. Well, my name is Bethany Mackey. It is good to meet everybody on the phone and on the video. The conversation Chris referenced was actually my first meeting with him as part of an interview process at Forward PMX. So served as a digital strategist, a nonprofit strategist there for 6 years. I've spent about half of my career at nonprofits in various fundraising positions, boots on the ground, doing fundraising events through running digital fundraising, and about half of my career on the agency side over 2 different agencies, running fundraising and marketing programs largely for Philanthropy 400 organizations like American Heart Association, Boys and Girls Clubs of America. Last July, had a really unique opportunity to move into the progressive sector, which was critical to me personally, but there is Progressive Multiplier is a funding intermediary, and we fund fundraising experimentation. So I serve as the Chief Marketing Officer for the parent company, Progressive Power Lab, and then Program Director, meaning I run all grant making for Progressive Multiplier Fund. And being sort of the R&D arm for progressive fundraising, agile testing, and lean testing is something that I live in every day now. So that's very excited to have this conversation.
Thanks, Bethany. Just want to check something. AJ, I just want to see if it's possible. That this other meeting somehow got picked up. Just 1 second. Nope. Okay. I just see there are people now texting. Where are you guys? But we'll mush on here. So as you start to look at what are the critical questions and start to figure out where do we go from here, they fall into these kind of overarching themes. Is the financial success the only driver of the business? I would lobby that it's the outcome, not the objective, particularly now when there's so much chaos and instability. But are we trying to define for now what it was and then use that as a benchmark, or what it now needs to be? An important question. It has to be tested. Otherwise, we're just throwing darts. And we're seeing lots of that in business right now, where you have what Bethany just said, which is people going back to the way it was. And then you have the complete opposite of that, both in states and locales, as well as people's homes. And so that translates into business as well. And what is that going to look like? And then the who, of course. Who are the beneficiaries for all the things that we're doing? Is our audience different, and are the benefits different than they were before? Therefore, is the engagement different now? is the way we communicate going to change? Does it change if you grind it down to what does that actually mean? We using the phone more, or is it going to be video? Before all this, of course, Zoom was just a tiny little company, not even capable of scaling. And it was rare that we had video or people were comfortable enough to use video. And so engagement is different now. And what about my mission, whether it's a nonprofit or whether it's a brand? What is that mission of what we're trying to achieve, and what defines goodness, or what defines success? I just finished an article I got published last week about luxury, and the theme was, what is luxury? And it was really this juxtaposition between these luxury things that you can or want or might be able to afford, or is luxury actually just a reflection of who we are and how we want to identify ourselves? And is it actually kind of the self-actualization of what it is we actually see in ourselves, that I like that dress or that blouse or that jacket or those shoes or whatever, because it helps me feel a certain way, or it helps me identify with what my level of success is or where I came from, and so on. So even things like luxury that traditionally have had a singular definition has kind of been tossed up in the air as well. And then this question of scale. What is scale? The traditional way, Bethany, we spoke earlier, we were saying that the traditional way of defining growth has maybe now really defined as an illusion.
Mm-hmm.
Did it really just take COVID-19 to change how to scale a business? Is the stability really there? Was it ever really there? So this is not a conversation necessarily about the virus. It's just the world that we're making decisions in now, and how do we take our experience when it now doesn't, the world does not look like this anymore. That building was there before. Now you see chaos. You might have seen that building in Italy before, saying, oh, wow, okay, that's unusual. Now you see doors and windows and people and clothes, and your brain is doing something different because the chaos of now decision-making and investment, never mind testing and experimenting, is very, very different. I have a different part of my life that is involved in music, and putting together a performance this coming Thursday night. And to put that together, as opposed to, hey, we'll meet up at the studio with 8 or 9 musicians and talent trying to help us get all this recorded, it couldn't have been more difficult and awkward to try to have somebody feel someone else's emotion and come off of their emotion to create your own. Very, very, very difficult. And so everything is unstable. And Bethany, I know you've gone down this path now in this new career you were hinting at. How is it different compared to what it was the day before, as it were? Maybe talk about that contrast.
Sure, and I have a couple of different perspectives on that, Chris, and that my previous career, where I was working with big established businesses that had been there for 40 years and had been using the same marketing controls for decades, this is how we did testing. This was the solid way to slow and linearly and very statistically significantly approach testing. And this worked. And it worked in that environment. And we made a lot of clients a lot of money by doing it this way. And I love what you just said, the chaos of decision-making and investment, let alone testing. This framework no longer works because the ground on which we do discovery and the data set available to do analysis just is in chaos. We've never been on this ground before as fundraisers and as marketers. It's really hard to do discovery in an unknown world. And I think that that's really the first domino that has fallen. And it was very humbling going from big, solid businesses that could do this to what we have represented on the next slide, which is sort of into a sector where there was no stability because it's a progressive sector. So there was no baseline. They live in a place where they're working towards what needs to be. It's never been realized. So there's no getting back to baseline or a baseline to beat. It's truly the vision of what it needs to be. So testing, if I could get the next slide,
Sure.
is sort of this, lives in this ideation place where we then have to, in small organizations that can't be constrained by, the math of it all. It is, how do we get out fast, put up a minimum viable product to a minimal audience and learn quickly, and do that in sort of a controlled chaos environment, where things change day to day in their external environment.
Bethany, talk about a couple of specifics, and it's probably a little too long now since you've left your more controlled environment into your chaos environment, but give a couple of examples maybe where you just got your eyes popped out, like, wow, this is going to be different. I need to kind of do the reset in my own brain so I can actually acclimate to the speed and pace of expectation, not just how you test and experiment and how you win and lose and so on, but actually the bit of the process that you have to go through in order to put yourself in a place where you can actually test these different theses that you would have and be able to properly examine them so that your results are correct. People are betting millions of dollars, right? As a funding mechanism, people out there are putting millions of dollars behind these. And you talk some about this too. A little bit of an obscure position, but a very large population of people that's not front page news.
So I think the best way, the most eye-popping thing for me was going from an environment where even the expectation was controlled. Could we raise revenue by 2%? Could we raise, an open rate by 10%? And what were the revenue ramifications of those? They weren't business changing or business evolution tests. They were slow and controlled increases in revenue. And the environment that I'm in now, the numbers and sort of expectations on mine and my grantees' heads every day is very different. It's, we need to reach 70% of the electorate, or we have elections to win, or we need to make sure that, workers get included in COVID-19 relief, things like that, that the stakes are very different. And I think the most sort of mindset shift for me was, how do you let go of the shackles of, hey, we may fail and fail big, versus what's the risk of not achieving, inclusion in workers' compensation in the COVID-19 for this population. When you start looking at the risk of not doing in that context, it's very different than like, yep, I may blow 30 grand on Facebook advertising and testing if I fail, but I'm going to let down millions of an underrepresented population if we don't crack this nut.
Yep. No, that's really, really well said. So I'm going to keep digging, and we have a much bigger group on the phone now. So I want to make sure we really go as deep as you can handle this,
Sure.
Bethany, because
do my best.
we have done this walk many, many times together about like what matters. The part that I'm so fascinated by, in addition to how you had to change, because it's a perfect metaphor for the world we're in right now. Nothing is stable. Nothing. What was the mindset shift? What did you do mindset wise to go from, okay, I failed and now I feel bad as a professional, right? Everybody on this call has a job to somebody, to, I can't believe I didn't test as aggressively as I need to and fail enough so that I could actually figure out how to be successful. It sounds cliche as an entrepreneur, but it is a massive mind shift. What did you do to get that to happen?
Well, for my program, we really put the rigor around failing forward. So, me, I'm a numbers geek. I love me my spreadsheets. So it couldn't just be big idea, let's throw the spaghetti at the wall kind of testing, but it had to be, if we fail and fail big, there has to be enough learning that we can take the next step. So I had one grantee that really failed forward in a big, bold way in trying to launch a testing. This was for Paid Leave US. They fight for paid leave with employers throughout the country. and sort of maternity benefits and things like that, and launched a fundraising program around, instead of doing a baby shower, do a Facebook fundraiser. Seems like a very simple concept of, honoring your baby with gifts to fight for paid leave and all of that. And got incredible signups to do it, but nobody then actually converted to the fundraising. So it was a colossal zero ROI on the investment as a grant maker.
But it felt so right when you got it the first.
It felt so right. Yeah. I mean, but as I say, giant fail forward that is really hard to put in a grant report to Chan Zuckerberg Initiative and those kind of folks. But now seeing how, like, we still have, here's the audience, here was the cadence, here are all of these bread and butter marketing things, and here's how we're going to tweak them for the next time. So, and we have enough solid failure that we have a really, really stable ground to launch off of for that next step. So that's really what I quantify. And I actually, within my business portfolio, I assume about a 70% fail forward rate, and a 20% success rate, and a 10% outright fail where there's no reviving it kind of failure. So looking at failure in a different quantifiable way was a huge mindset shift.
And how quick now, and again, this is the whirlwind, right? So you can't say, oh, well, I'll let you know in January. Time for that, right? But that was 6 months ago. That was the world, right?
Yep.
So take the 20% that's successful. How fast do you have to flip the 20 to scale it? And how do you define scale now?
Mm-hmm.
How is that different?
So for us, scale, as essentially as a grant maker and an investor, I expect that 20% to return 2 to 1 in 12 months. So it's very aggressive, because what we're trying to identify are tactics that other nonprofits can take, boxed up, and go run with. So we have very high expectations of the successes, and that's what scale looks like to us. And so we need to be able to return that 2 to 1 quickly, and to scale for any nonprofit to be able to scale it to $1 million plus if they pick up the idea and go with it within a 12-month cycle. So, I mean, you've been in fundraising a long time. You know that those are some really high expectations of our successes. And then, as I say, with the 70% that we expect to fail forward, we do sort of quad cycles for all of the baseline techniques of, you can kind of fail 3 times and we need to land on the 4th of that incremental learning, so that by then you have sort of tested all the things you can test within one track. So we've put a lot of rigor around how to fail versus the rigor around how to test to success. So I think that's really the mindset shift, is putting those guardrails around something fundamentally different within the testing program.
Yep. I'm just gonna turn to the audience. Hey, Pete, can I ask you a question? You can say no, it's fine.
Yeah, you may. Sorry.
Okay, thanks. That's okay. You can. No is perfect. It's just, I know, because we spoke last week, I know you've gone through your own version of what Bethany just described in your business, which is the search industry and finding great talent for companies. Can you hint a little bit, without giving away, too much information, but can you hint a bit of what you've had to do in a similar way in an industry that has really no comparison to what Bethany described, but it is the same, which is, testing, experimenting new ideas, and not just throwing darts. Would you mind just giving a little bit of perspective on that?
Sure. I mean, what's changed for us is, just the business, hiring, the whole landscape has changed. And so we had to decide very quickly, what did we need to change in terms of how we operated with our 2 main constituencies, clients and candidates. And so we very quickly got rid of the, hey, we're here for you thing, and really just said, this is who we are. These are the different ways that we can help if and when you need help. And our clients have very much, responded positively about that. And then the candidate base, difficult people to get a hold of traditionally, and now they're all sitting at home contemplating their post-COVID-19 careers. And so we've really changed from, you know, what changes do you want to make now, to let's talk about what the future looks like for your career, and do you want to commute into Manhattan anymore, and things like that. So the conversation has just really evolved to being more consultative. And I mean, Chris, you know our business, that's kind of how we operate anyways. But and, you know, and then you talk just about how we communicate. You know, we've tried to use video for years for interviewing remotely, and we had a lot of candidate pushback. So I think the technology has improved over the last few years, but I think that's really going to change. I think it's going to change where people work in digital marketing and many careers. And I think that video conferencing is here to stay.
Yeah.
At a lot of levels.
Yep. Thanks for, no, it's great. Thank you for asking. Brandon, I know you're on the line as well. I'll figure out how to get you off on mute. While you're doing that, just a quick background on Brandon Coleman is on the line. I met him many years ago when he and I did a session together for a mutual client. And it was all around this conversation, actually. And it was about helping this veterans organization get to its next defined strategy, because they were so stuck in serving veterans in a particular way. And Brandon has a company called Big Picture Thinking, which enables him, really the audience with executive level leaders, to be able to have these hard conversations and ask the tough question. And then he went off on the side and invested in a NASCAR team for his son, who's an incredible driver. But he has since left that and gone back to lots of other things. Brandon, are you on the line and off mute by chance, or no? Not yet. Okay, I'll come back to him. Anybody else want to weigh in on this? I know, Trent, you're on the line. Debbie or anybody just want to toss kind of comments into what you're seeing. What's different now, and how are you reacting to that? Or if not, we can push on. One of the challenges with video conferencing, we need like little groovy music between the answers. Well, I can come back, no problem. But it's the kind of thing I would say every organization is pondering now, to try to open up with those that are the change makers and the leaders, a conversation about the future. I've been saying this since the beginning, that the furloughs was just a BS ruse to not hire people back. And sadly, a lot of that's coming true. So we're finding people who used to fit the perfect job no longer being asked to come back, or the scenario changes, or the job they had is changing. And so when you get into different ethnic groups, different religious groups, different almost kind of non-traditional views of how people operate in an environment like a business of any type, it's now putting pressure in places we didn't anticipate, where people have kids at home, or parents at home, or someone's sick. There's a caretaker, and I used to commute, now I don't anymore, and now I'm home. And you're reading about all these changes in people's lives that are causing us very different behavior considerations. Back to you, Bethany.
Yeah, sure. Just on that, Chris, I think one of the interesting things over the last 2 months with the organizations that I work with is that it's not just their approach to business that's had to change in terms of investment and testing and things like that, but in some cases it's completely torn their mission and direction from its moorings. So what used to be advocating for workers' rights now means something very different than it did before. And advocating for parents' rights and corporate accountability has a totally new definition that it didn't have 90 days ago. And so I think that whole what we were talking about earlier in terms of stability really is an illusion, because it doesn't take much to do that kind of complete shift in where the business is headed and how you have to operate it. So I just wanted to, before we wrap up, just a few sort of things that I've learned in my last now 10 months. It's hard to believe. In the philanthropic sector here, we talked a little bit about declines and failures are really the most fertile testing grounds. So what I tell my grantees is the more failure, the better, because that gets us actually where we want to go faster. So, my grantees can have up to 6 grants before we actually do investment in scale, where we are expecting them to turn around that 2 to 1. And it amazes me the lightning speed at which they can move through that to get to that point of scale.
Bethany, how quickly are you making decisions from test to go?
I would say I don't have any tests that are running longer than 30 days. That is at the outset. Yeah. Some of my grantees actually run truly agile testing where they're making a call in 72 hours.
It's amazing.
And that little test done right and quickly can move big needles. One of my grantees in a 12-month period ran over 80 tests within their donation program. Very simple tests, like, do I say donate by PayPal on a button? Do I turn the donate button red versus green? Do I, put the copy above or below the donate button? Just those tiny little ticky-tack tests.
Yeah.
And they grew their sustainer base from 2,000 sustainers a month to about 8,000 sustainers a month.
And what is that, just in their world, what does that mean in terms of dollars raised, would you say?
It's just over 50 grand a month.
Wow.
Yeah. So when I say little tests done right and quickly can move very big needles, for them, that allows them to get to about, 50% more population when it comes to doing the get out the vote work that they want to do. And all by, failing forward and failing fast in a controlled chaos way.
AJ, in your world of managing creative artists in an industry that's music, and I know you have a chef that you manage that career, you have all different industries you're involved with. How do you put this in context of a world that obviously has fundamentally changed, going on the road and playing in clubs and so on? How are you testing and learning at a time where the artists are putting a lot of pressure on you, I'm sure, to come up with new ideas? How is that coming around? And maybe just one other comment. Are you seeing it being driven by the managers, the talent, and or are the tech companies and other companies now starting to figure this out? And do you see kind of this, integration of the industries as opposed to being driven by one or another?
So to answer the first question on the changes that are going on, and the way that I've been handling it personally, like Bethany said, we're testing at rapid speed right now, and like what you guys are essentially talking about here, and we found that the slightest things, like Bethany said, of moving the donate now button, for instance, like doing a live stream and moving the his virtual tip jar for one of my artists to the top opposed to in the middle of the comments, and getting to that sooner, and making sure that that's done as soon as possible opposed to just tossing it in there midstream. Those little things boosted the revenue for that small thing boosted the revenue for a show, and that small change has great outcomes, it's just been a whirlwind of just different things getting thrown. We're testing different platforms, whether in terms of tech. It seems we've had a different side effect with Zoom, which is the more private parties, that kind of thing, opposed to doing like a Facebook Live where, you're reaching a bigger audience. It depends on what the real goal is of what we're going after, and then using different platforms to achieve that goal.
Are you seeing the platforms and the tech companies starting to pull pull that industry in? Or are you pushing them to say we need this or that? Are you starting to see more partnership?
I think the artists have been really innovative in their own ways and using every platform in their own different way. And in terms of the management and the artists, I think the musicians and the artists are really kind of grasping it and taking more control. A lot of agencies have dropped artists, so they're basically on their own. So they're kind of, in survival mode.
Yeah. Wow. Great. Thanks for jumping in there.
Sure.
So some other comments from a bit of polling across a number of different entrepreneurs during the kind of experimenting and testing and things that they're going through. I found a few that I thought were fascinating. Not my line, but said very well. Castles in the sky are mirrors that reveal only your best features. So to be pie in the sky and to really throw the big idea out there, if you trust in that, all you're really doing is reflecting back on yourself and your best features, that must be a great idea. Well, that was always the case with entrepreneurship and coming up with best ideas. We're actually saying, listening to Bethany and AJ, your comments, and Pete, and I know Brandon was trying to jump in, but whatever, can't figure it out at this moment. But I will hear from him, and I'll share that as we follow up. But what we're actually doing is flipping the whole script and saying, fail. Work to fail. Don't just fail based on a flimsy set of data that may or may not in the future play itself out. You may have seen today SoftBank declared a $19 billion loss on WeWork and Uber predominantly. Not great for the Japanese economy that just went into recession. So what is that going to mean for testing when venture capital would make and hedge funds would make gigantic bets on the possibility that they could go public and scale a business model? This castles in the sky, these big illusory ideas generally don't work out. That it is about the numbers, and this second point of believe your numbers. If they don't add up, rework the plan, not the numbers, which is something I've always felt very strongly about. You can always create another set of numbers to be right on paper. But if you don't rework the plan, you don't fix the problem. You don't actually get underneath exactly what's happening. And Bethany really said that way down in the weeds, that she had to really look at the numbers and believe them or not and make bets on them, so that in her particular case, she's got major donors donating money to progressive causes, but also in the context of business, it's very, very similar. We're making bets, but we're making bets to fail so that we can uncover the successes, as opposed to the opposite of that, which is invest in successes in the hopes that one of them will work out. Private equity and hedge generally assumes in their portfolio a fairly significant failure rate, and they'll put cash against or debt against these ideas, knowing that a very high percentage of them are going to fail, but they're betting on them to succeed. What we're actually saying is flip that script and test fail so that you can find the successes. I couldn't help myself, and I'm not a big Friends fan, but I do happen to like that small little image there, which is pivoting. This is Ross pivoting to get the couch up the stairwell. You might, if you've ever seen the episode, or move the couch. Somebody said, pivot. We have to assume at least 5 to 7 pivots per strategy, per product, per plan before we can actually figure it out. 5 to 7. Which means testing is going to be a lot more expensive. In a 4% unemployment time and a fat growing Dow and IRAs and 401ks that are continuing to increase, everything looks great. We're going to have to be able to continue to evolve and be able to pivot. Just as kind of a closing this is not really talked about, but really quite fascinating when you look at the collaboration that I was asking AJ about around industry and how industry is helping and becoming part of the triangle. These four companies, as well as MIT and other organizations around the world, own the largest supercomputers. Well, for the first time, these four companies together are contributing their supercomputers to figure out this vaccine crisis. You've all heard Dr. Fauci early on say, and Mr. Gates and his wife Melinda say, 18 to 24 months for a vaccine. Well, we're going to be testing vaccines in October. That didn't happen because scientists were smarter or just worked harder and longer. It's because the power of the computer enables us to test configurations simultaneously at a very, very high rate of speed. And so we're now getting industry involved in ways that just wouldn't happen before. They would have gone through some long government process of soliciting RFPs and so on to try to get something, to get that to actually occur, to be able to create possibilities for vaccines. And we're now reading about them every single day. So on the right is more of a controlled chaos, still blowing up the light bulb, because ultimately you do have to shatter perception in order to create something new. You have to be able to step back and, as Bethany said, kind of rewire herself for failure. It reminds me early in my career on America Online, the woman that ran all of the business for America Online, in a meeting, she yelled at me in front of about 12 people, and it was totally humiliating. And I know her extremely well, but she ultimately was yelling at me because she said I wasn't failing enough. And she said some choice words, but she's like, what are you doing with our money? You are wasting our money. Don't tell me about my 60% success rate. Kind of what you said, Bethany. Show me how to fail 70% of the time. I'm creating an industry. This is pre-internet growth like it has become, of course. But there's something to that, and it's just great to see more partnership as we start to solve things like restaurants and the like. We're going to have to see industry work together to get at innovation, because that's the only way out. So this testing and experimenting and pressure, putting pressure on convention, throwing out history, it's probably not worth anything anyway. What would you possibly compare May of 2020 to May 2019? I don't know. Maybe the names are the same. JCPenney and the like own 30% of the malls right now. JCPenney just filed today or yesterday. What is the mall business going to do? Well, they're not going to sit around. What we know they're going to do is they're adding entertainment. They're going more to a Vegas type of structure of their model. They can't just wait for retail. So there's a lot going on, but I think the centerpiece of that, and maybe just a way to wrap this up, and Bethany, your final comments, is controlling the chaos as much as we can, but being reliant on the collisions and the ability to take the risk to find success. I'll bounce back to you for any final comments.
Yeah, I think history is at best directional. At this point, I know in my world, we're looking a lot at the Great Recession, 2007 through 2010, for everybody's trying to build the model of how bad this is going to be, which we're spending a ridiculous amount of time as a nonprofit industry trying to define how bad it's going to be. And it's like, it's going to be bad. We know it. Just keep going. How bad doesn't matter. We know we need to do everything we can to recession-proof our fundraising as best we can, but there is no applicable model for today. So
I think each of us, Pete, Trent, others on the line, Brandon, we know May 2021 will not look like this. It's just fact. May 19, we wouldn't have said May 20 would be that much different. And so the only way out of evolving is testing and being willing to put the pressure on. So we'll end there. Any comments and questions? I would say, if you would, we'll follow up with this presentation as well as a recording for anybody who wants it. Bethany and my contact information is inside, and I don't want to take any more time than we asked for, but we will certainly solicit any questions anybody has or any follow-ups or any introductions people would like to have. That's it. Thank you very much. Have a great week.
Thanks, Chris.
See you soon.
Take care, all.
Thank you, guys.
Bye now.
Bye-bye.
Bye. See you.